Howdy folks, I'm Ross Weaver. I'm here to do another Death Stranding 2 video. If you haven't seen on Twitter, Kojima posted a week or two ago, I think it was a couple weeks ago now before Con, that he was not going to have a chance to cut the release trailer for Death Stranding 2 when that time came. So he had to cut it early. So he's already got it made. It's already kind of prepared for release, I assume. He said in his Twitter post that he was going to reveal everything in this trailer. And so I figure now is probably the last chance to get in good predictions before he's revealed everything, and predictions kind of become impossible to do. This will be my last video probably that I make on Death Stranding 2 before its release. I suspect I'll do another one after this, after its release and after I've played through it. But that'll just take as long as it takes. It'll probably be sometime in maybe end of July. We'll see. Probably I may end up doing like shorter videos along the way. I don't know. We'll see. But I haven't really put. We'll get to at the end of this video. I'm gonna talk a little about my plans for the channel's future a little bit. And I'll get into that stuff at the end of the video, but I'll probably be focusing on Death Stranding 2 for a little bit here in the immediate future, and won't be getting back to Metal Gear for a little bit, but it seems like with Death Stranding 2 we're gonna have plenty of Metal Gear to talk about. And I'll get to that here in a sec. But basically I've got 5 points that I'm gonna go over. I've got them written on my whiteboard over here. And I'm just going to kind of talk about stuff I've already talked about in the previous 3 videos I've made about Death Stranding 2, and kind of following up and honing in on some of the predictions. We've heard some new details since I made my last video 2 months ago about the review event happened back in April, I believe it was, and then the embargo lifted for that in May. And we heard some new details earlier this month. I believe it was on May 8th. Yeah. And so that kind of revealed a little bit about my predictions. Some of them are a little off, but most of the big stuff's, we'll get to it. Most of it's pretty good. Yeah, this video is not going to be all predictions. I'm going to be talking about it here kind of at the beginning, and then as we get into the video, I'm going to be talking more and more about speculative stuff. Like the predictions are stuff that I've got like more of a methodology for sussing out, and the speculation is more just like we're gonna get crazy with it and kind of get a little wild. So strap in, folks, and hope you enjoy this video. So the first thing I've got, the big point that I want to make as far as like predictions go, is that I think it appears that Hideo's process for Death Stranding 2, for a lot of his scenes so far, it appears that he's going to use a method of referential mirroring, is what I'm calling it. So essentially, if you remember, I've talked about the Matrix reference scene with Neo sitting across the table from Smith, and that being referenced with Neo sitting across the table from the Bridges suit guy. And I talked earlier also about how they referenced Evangelion when Tomorrow is being looked at after she gets out of the chrysalis, and she shoots the tar stuff onto Fragile's hands. That's an Evangelion reference, but it was mirrored, as I said. Things were kind of on the opposite side. It appears that's going to be going on probably all throughout this game. There's probably going to be a lot of scenes that are going to be probably straight up pulled from a movie or a TV show or something like that, but had its set or its blocking mirrored in some way. I think a lot of it even possibly came up I've been trying to think about how what we see of Fragile's escape from the bunker, we'll call it. How I was saying it was like the hospital, but it's a mirrored kind of version of the hospital, but it's inverted. It's instead of starting in the 3rd floor and descending down and escaping the bottom floor, she starts at the bottom and has to ascend up and escape at the top. And notice how she uses the elevator to go up. We can't use the elevator in the Phantom Pain, obviously, because Volgin takes it out of commission. But I think you see what I'm saying? There's some mirroring going on. Maybe she can use the elevator because, you know, this story is a little different, right? And, well, also, I want to note here about that scene. I've predicted that this character that shoots them is not Higgs. Since I made those predictions, I've noticed this great YouTube creator, Ambyes, Ambyes. Go check her out. She made a whole bunch of videos about Death Stranding 2 stuff that she's analyzed the trailers probably better than anybody I've seen so far. She really digs in on some of this stuff. And she noticed that she took the image that we got in the third trailer of the guy who shoots Fragile and Luis. It's a decent look at the face, better than we got previously. She was able to enhance the image and reveal it looks like Higgs's mask is on the person. They seem to have Higgs's hood on as well that we see Higgs wearing elsewhere. But I kind of wonder if that isn't Higgs and if that's someone else being controlled by Higgs's mask. This group kind of strikes me a lot like Neil's group, actually. It may not be Neil's group exactly, but the way there's the three of them that are waiting on their own, and then the one elsewhere kind of has a little bit of a cliff thing going on, which if Neil's a new cliff, you see what I'm getting at. This may be somebody who's under Higgs's control. And Higgs, like I've been saying, may still be caught on the beach, on Amelie's beach, and is not able to really come into the world. So Higgs may still be trapped on Amelie's beach, and he's doing all this stuff in reality by manipulating other people and his connections, essentially. He uses the mask, I think. He probably uses the Kipu. He uses robots. I'm sure he uses lots of things. He's kind of like a puppeteer, or even maybe a puppet master of puppets. Metallica reference going on here. Another mirrored scene I wanted to mention too before I get off the subject is that scene where the Magellan is put on the head of the giant, and then we see the shot from behind, and in the front there's the three giants that kind of have the rays on their back and they have the wings. That's a reference to Metal Gear Solid 2. When Raiden is in the somewhere room in Arsenal Gear and he has to fight those rays, it's the big long ray battle, right? But when it first starts, there's three of them that come up, and they're kind of in the same formation as these three enemies, these three giants that we're gonna have to face them in Death Stranding 2. So there's probably going to be a lot of Metal Gear Solid 2 in Death Stranding 2. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think we're going to get Raiden again. I think we're going to have a protagonist swap. I think tomorrow might be the other player character. There might even be another player character beyond her. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but Rainey might be somehow available, kind of like a buddy. Because I've been thinking about how in the Phantom Pain you have this buddy system, and we have all of these different people that we can go out with. Well, maybe Dollman is like a buddy that you can go out with, and he gives you certain abilities. But maybe other times, instead of Dollman, maybe somehow you can take Rainey along with you, and Rainey will give you some abilities. Maybe if you're going to go through a bunch of timefall and it's really dangerous, maybe somehow you can bring Rainey, and as we've heard, she can switch the timefall around her to corefall, as they called it, I think. And corefall actually is the reverse of timefall. It heals you. So maybe, you see what I'm getting at, maybe there's going to be some kind of a buddy system where the different people that Sam takes out with him will kind of depend, with whatever delivery or whatever mission he's got at the time. As I say, this is going to be referential mirroring, so it's going to be like kind of the same stuff but mirrored. And I'm going to get back into the mirroring stuff. But the reason things are coming up mirrored, people have noticed this a lot already, and I'm going to get back into it, but just to say it, the cure for phantom pain in real life, there's not really a good medicinal cure. You can't really take a pill, or there might be some surgeries that can kind of help, but if you want to get a good effective cure psychologically, they do mirror therapy. So let's say you're missing your left hand, and you've got phantom pain in it. This part's been cut off. You take the stump that's left and you put it into a box that blocks your vision of where your hand would be. And then you put a mirror, you kind of put it off to the side, and you put a mirror next to your hand where you would like a window would be, but it's the mirrors there. Then you take your other hand and you place it on the other side of this hand, across from it where it's displayed in the mirror. And then I believe you also have to block out sight to the right hand as well, if it's the left hand that's cut off. And you'll just see your right hand mirrored as your left, and then any sensations felt on your right hand will actually sort of trigger the left hand sensation feeling side of your brain, because your brain sees your left hand as your mirrored right hand. And it's a wild thing, apparently, to see it work. So if mirror therapy is the cure for phantom pain, I've said this a bunch in my Metal Gear Solid V Explained lecture videos, then if Death Stranding 2 is going to be largely referential to Metal Gear Solid V, then it's probably going to employ the same mirroring technique, because chiral stuff is mirrored, right? It's already kind of written into Death Stranding's lore that chirality is a core thing in this universe. And so the mirroring, you might not just see it as mirroring, you might see it as chiral phenomenon going everywhere. They're proliferating, essentially. And yeah, we'll get back to chiral stuff, but that's basically my first point, is that we're going to see a lot of referential mirroring. We're going to see scenes that you've seen from some popular something swapped around. Left is going to become right, or maybe up is going to become down, because that's how mirrors work. They might do some left becomes right and up becomes down stuff, but mirrors, chirality, I think it's better if it's probably just in one direction most of the time. So look out for that. Okay, number 2, I want to get into my predictions about the gameplay areas and where this game's going to be set. So I said that it was going to be starting in Mexico and then moving into South America. Of course, I'm wrong. We learned that the second area is Australia. The plate gate actually takes us across the Pacific Ocean. And I could have predicted this if I had just thought a little harder about it, but I didn't. In the Phantom Pain, well, let me just skip to what the big idea is. The Phantom Pain kind of depicts a series of events that takes place over 9 years, and they are kind of a reflection of the lost, missing memories of the previous 9 years of the coma, which we weren't really in a coma, we just lost our memories. And the coma as a whole, it's a lie. He was in a coma, but it wasn't that long. It's a whole deal. But 1975 is when Ground Zeroes takes place, and then we don't know anything about what happens until 1984. Supposedly when we wake up and the Phantom Pain takes place, there's this missing gap of 9 years from 75 to 84. And so Death Stranding 2 is going to be a chiral 1975 to 1984. But it's not going to be necessarily like going backwards in time or anything like that. It's going to be chiral as if it's like you drew it on a map and then you put it next to a mirror. It's going to be the mirrored version of that. So if Ground Zeroes started in, let's say, the Gulf of Mexico, around Mexico, the Caribbean, it's all kind of, one big area right there. You could say it's close enough. After that, I was saying in my lecture series that after Central America, Mexico, and that whole shebang went off, they went to Africa, to Rhodesia. And that was 77 to 79. There was a whole campaign in the jungles there. That's probably what Australia is going to be. Essentially, if you look on the map and you go one way, you go to Australia. And you look on the map, you go the mirrored way, you go to Africa. You're still crossing a big ocean. You're going a little bit further across the Pacific, admittedly, but you could kind of see them as, Australia's kind of a chiral Africa, essentially. So, and Africa is really just chapter 1. As they said in the review event, Mexico was really more of just the intro area. And I was kind of suspecting they might do this, but I bet on the wrong thing. I said that they were probably going to use Mexico as the big first area. Obviously, Mexico's not going to be the big first area. It's going to be the training area. And then Australia is going to be the big first area. Like I said, though, there's probably going to be 2 big main playable areas. So the other one that the reviewers didn't get access to will probably be this chiral Iraq-Iran, essentially. because what happened after the Rhodesia phase was 1979. This Iran revolution happened, as they say in the timeline. And then 1980 began the Iraq-Iran war phase, which didn't end until 84. And that's where I say the real downfall of Big Boss happened. And that's probably what we're going to see. If you go from Australia in a kind of mirrored direction from where Africa went to Iraq-Iran, you kind of still get to Iraq-Iran. It's pretty close. It's not exactly it, but it's kind of in the Himalayas. It's maybe a little bit east of that, but you're kind of in the same part of the world, so we may end up in Death Stranding 2 ending in some Iraq-Iran, maybe a desert battlefield, possibly. It still jives with me that there's going to be jungles somewhere, but they may put the jungles in Australia, because I know Australia's got basically jungles. It's not the same kind of jungles that you find necessarily in like the Amazon, like I was predicting, or like in over in Rhodesia, like I've been talking about. But it's thick-wooded, forested areas with lots of dangerous stuff. Australia, and I think it's pretty obvious too. The reason he's picking Australia, another reason he's picking Australia, is because it fits with George Miller. That's where Mad Max is set, and where George Miller's from. So it's just, it all kind of fits together real well to use Mad Max's Australia kind of as a chiral mirror reference for all of his Rhodesia, Africa stuff in Metal Gear that never really got told in the story. If you draw it on the map, it's like you kind of get a W shape a little bit on the paths. If you start kind of in Mexico and start really more around Nicaragua and Costa Rica, and you draw a line going to Australia and another line going to Africa, to Rhodesia, and then it's not exactly the same, but it's kind of a W. You can kind of get a couple of different ending points from that. So that may be where the game's ending. I also said earlier that there was this, in the Phantom Pain, missions 30 and 31 are a return to Afghanistan. And that's kind of where that's this Iraq-Iran stuff that I've been talking about. And in the Phantom Pain, they kind of skip the whole war phase of it and just show us the ending. And that's because what they do is they cut up the rest of the war and they give it to us in other places. They kind of already gave it to us with the Afghanistan stuff in missions 1 through 12. And they do some other elaboration on it in the repeats and the other missions post Mission 30. But that's just, anyways, we don't want to get into the Phantom Pain too much. But again, this is probably what Death Stranding is going to be referential to in a lot of ways. So once more, I want to say, if you want to go back and learn more about Metal Gear, I've got a whole series of lectures explaining what I really think is going on in the Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes and why it is all the way it is. And to get to my next point, one of the things I talked about in that series was there's time travel going on secretly within Metal Gear. And I think there may be a hint, and this is where I'm getting into speculation, there may be a hint that we're going to see a little bit of time travel going on in Death Stranding. We know some time travel going on with how the chiral network operates, but it seems like it's just sending data and information to and from the beach, right? And we can understand that. But we may start seeing some physical object may have come back from the future. Pardon me. So this Red Samurai character, which I've said is he's Gray Fox, he's Chico, and we'll get more into that, but again, Ambias noticed one of the textures on his arm, the writing was mirrored for some reason. It didn't appear like it was a mistake. It looked like it was intentional. And she's found some other mirrored stuff. Kojima Productions just released this video that's just this 40 or 41 second sort of a ambient nothing video of a view from inside a prepper's shelter looking out, waiting for a porter, waiting for Sam, probably. It's probably the first porter or the first shelter that we're going to visit in the game, I'm guessing. And, they're waiting for us. But they just released this video, and it had some text written inside the bunker that you can make out. And on one side, you could see all the text, and it was cool. But on the other side, there was the same text mirrored. And it was weird because other stuff on that texture on that other side had writing on it elsewhere, which was not mirrored. So they could have just not mirrored the text. They probably had to do work actually to mirror it. So it seemed odd that they put it there, she said. And again, it's just mirror therapy stuff. It's indicating that this journey is probably going to be more, you could say more mirror therapy. It's going to provide more elaboration and context on the stuff that Kojima couldn't tell within Metal Gear's timeline. Probably, he may have been held back by Konami. At this point, I'm not going to speculate too much about stuff I don't know about, but, he may be putting all this stuff here as a way of, throwing the baggage that he built up, during those years making Metal Gear over his shoulder, and finally, getting some kind of a way to move on from it. Death Stranding that'd be appropriate, right? But this mirrored text is got written on it the number 22XX, and now that's, if you've played a lot of video games, you probably know 22XX is kind of a reference to a year, sometime in 2200, in the year 2200. And not to get too crazy into it, but I've predicted that Death Stranding probably takes place in 2048. And I'm fairly certain that Death Stranding ends on June 3rd, 2048, which is when Lou is born, because that's 204863. It's a whole thing. Because 2048 is the year, 6 is the month, and 3 is the day, I believe, is what I figured out. Yeah, because it's June, yeah. Which is funny because June's coming up, and this is, it's around what I was saying was Lou's birthday, so maybe that's even got some relevance here too. But if Death Stranding's taking place in 2048, then 22XX is probably a reference to something in the future, which indicates to me that this bot was manufactured in the year 2200 and came back to the past to change things, or to possibly fulfill a history that was already written, in a sense. It may be getting done by a BB on the beach. Maybe possibly the BB that Sam carries in Death Stranding 2 isn't one BB. Maybe it's two BBs and they get swapped out at some point. When? I don't know. Maybe when Dead Man takes the one BB and all of a sudden there's a problem and then there's not. Maybe. Or maybe it's a different BB at the very beginning of the game, and then when the void out happens and he comes back from the beach with the BB in his arms, maybe that's a different BB. I think there's any number of possibilities where like a swap could have happened, because going to the beach, coming back with a BB, there's kind of a possibility of a magic trick essentially happening where that BB could be swapped out and you might not know it, essentially, because you can't communicate with it, right? It's not like they got him tagged. So yeah, there may be time travel going on here. And that's just wild speculation, but I had to say that. The next thing I want to bring up is more Gray Fox stuff. The reviewers mentioned, and this was a cool thing to hear, some people found this optional scene when they were going through this one part of the game. Apparently, if you go to clear out a mule camp, or a bandit camp, I think as it was called, there's this optional cutscene you can get at one of them where the Red Samurai shows up and just murks everybody, kind of like Gray Fox. And they were like, what is this? Why is this here? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, well, of course, this lines up with everything I've been saying. And so I'm wondering if a lot of the scenes, it's like I was saying, we're going to see in Australia, there'll be this Red Samurai who's out, not necessarily to hurt us, not to help us, but is out for the same people that we're against, essentially. Kind of an enemy of my enemy situation. And it's going to probably largely, if it's in Australia, it's probably going to be this bloody demon Chico who's probably been transformed. Early on, he probably didn't have a lot of his memories, or maybe he did and he was like incredibly clear. It could be either way. But he was probably mostly, uncontrollable in a sense. And I've talked about it a lot in the Phantom Pain lecture series again, but there's just too much to tell here. I just wanted to mention that I think we're going to see a lot of scenes that call back to the Phantom Pain, that really call back to what Chico underwent in his youth before he really fully became Gray Fox. And yeah. And so the last thing I've got to mention is going back to that video I talked about that they posted. The way we found out about this video is Kojima Productions last weekend, I think it was, or early in the week. I can't remember. It was several days ago. They did this event at a local mall in Japan, I believe, where they handed out little packets of tissue paper. And it's got a Death Stranding 2 logo on it, and then a QR code was printed on it. If you scan the QR code, it would take you to this unlisted YouTube video, which was the 40 or 41 seconds of... On YouTube, it says 41 seconds when you play it in the player. And it's just this view of nothing, and you can just hear ambient, wind noises and other stuff in the background. There's nothing really to see except these little small details. And the one thing I picked up on it, in the video title, there's 3 question marks, and nobody really knew, what this is for, why they're doing this. They did just say, I think earlier today on Twitter, that they are teasing something to be happening on May 28th, which is like tomorrow, in like 24 hours from right now. May 28th Japan time, though. And maybe they'll reveal something about this. But the 3 question marks made me think of early on in Death Stranding 2's promo campaign. They released those posters with the silhouettes and the who am I, where am I, and why me questions. And there were 3 of them. One of them was L, one of them was Shioli, and one of them was Norman. Or really Tomorrow, as we know them now, Tomorrow, Rainy, and Sam. And, that's kind of an interesting trio. Why those 3? Rainey's the one character that I'm still kind of clueless about. She's the one that I can tell she's going to hit me in my blind spot. I swear I think there's a lot of Mei Ling going on there. I think somehow paramedic being Mei Ling, as I've predicted, this may also have relations to why we see Rainey with the doctor there. The doctor these may be kind of different personas of paramedic over the years in Metal Gear. I don't know. But there's clearly something going on there with the 3 questions and the who am I, where am I, why me, and the silhouettes, and something about Sam's identity, and something about Rainey's identity, and something about Tomorrow's identity, I guess. And I want to say something about BB's identity too, and just every character in the game seems like there's going to be questions of identity, and this idea of where am I is like, where is the thing that you call you? Is it in your body? Is it outside your body? Is it, is it a spirit? Is it just something that emerges as we're alive and it's a neurochemical process, Where am I relates to that in a way. And why me, I think, just relates to sort of like, why does the world end up, doing the things to us it does? Why do we end up with the lot in life? And that's just a very classic question, I think. Anybody who's ever suffered asks that. So, I with all of this said, I think this video being 41 seconds kind of cued me in. I'm not going to talk about it much in this video, but I've talked about it a whole lot on Twitter. It relates to the Blue Box saga, yes, and Hassan Karaman, yes. 41 was something I ran across years ago, and then the Death Stranding director's cut came out, and they added route UC 41, and then I realized 41 is really, it's a chiral 14. The Kipu has 14 strands, so 41 is related to 14. 1941 also relates to the year 1941 because of the year the movie The Final Countdown is set, and that has to do with time travel and wormholes and stuff, which is what's going on here in Death Stranding. And so the 14 strands of the Kipu decode to the number 1776. So it's about America. It's something that's very, very hard to put into words succinctly or quickly, but it's all coming together for me. The 41, when I saw it was 41 seconds, that was a regular thing that I saw come up during the Blue Box saga, was that sort of mystery things would be encoded in the metadata of objects and files being shared. So the length of time of a video, or the number of frames in a video that things were occurring, or even like the number of pixels in the border of an image came up a few times. I saw they've seen, and Kojima Productions has done this too, not just crazy stuff in Blue Box. Again, I don't want to get into it all here because it's kind of not my place to share. I think people need to discover this themselves, and I'm not going to try and convince you all here because this stuff's crazy. But if you go and see with your own eyes and think with your own thoughts, you might come to see some of the stuff I've seen. And if I'm right about this, I've already pre-ordered Death Stranding 2. I'm ready for it. I got the digital deluxe version, so I'll be getting early access to it. I may try to stream it, but my internet connection does not do upload speeds. It's terrible. I have to pay quite a bit more here in my city to get decent upload speeds for streaming, and I do this for fun. I'm not gonna be doing that. So I may record some videos of my gameplay or something like that, but most of my gameplay, I'm probably gonna keep it to myself and talk to y'all about it afterwards, and I may share some of my gameplay later on. Maybe I'll stream a little bit, but we'll see. With that said, I think that's about all I want to say about Death Stranding 2 for now and my predictions on it. Like I said, I'm going to do more talks about it. I'm going to talk more about it once the game is out and people have had time to digest it a little bit. I've had time to digest it a little bit. I'm super excited. It feels surreal, actually. Like, I haven't been super excited about it yet, but I know I should be. But I've just, life's been busy, and it's been like awful and rainy and stormy, and I've had awful allergies lately. So, it's been hard for me to appreciate the finer things in life. But I am excited about this, and I'm kind of curious as to what's coming next, because here's my thing. If he's going to do all of this stuff where he follows up Metal Gear's untold stories in Death Stranding, which I kind of think he already was doing that with parts of Death Stranding's elements, let's say. Maybe not a bunch of its story, but maybe some of its individual elements, right? But if he's going to do it more wholly here with Death Stranding 2, what's Fizzent got going on? Why would he? He said today, he's just basically making Fizzent because so many people have said they want him to make another Metal Gear game, which is crazy to me. Like, if you enjoy if you enjoy Metal Gear, you should be able to enjoy Death Stranding, because the same things that are core, I think, to making Metal Gear enjoyable are present in Death Stranding. They're not in the exact same form, but they're present. You just have to kind of adapt your way of seeing them. Because, again, I'm going to say this real quick. I talked about this in a Discord the other day. I just think this is really cool. In the Phantom Pain, when you start playing, there's this question of, are you going to be lethal or non-lethal? Same as in Death Stranding, right? But in the Phantom Pain, when you start playing non-lethally and you're tranking dudes all over bases, it actually, once you trank a dude and he's down on the ground, it creates a bunch of problems. Other enemies will see him and come up to him and try to wake him up, and you've got to trank them before they wake him up. And if he gets woken up, you got to trank him again. It wastes a whole lot of ammo. It's hard to get headshots when guys are moving around like that. Tranking guys creates a lot of problems, right? You've got enemies that are sleeping. You've got to drag them off and hide them somewhere. It's not exactly the most expedient way to play the Phantom Pain. It leaves you with a lot of busy work to do after you've shot a guy. Whereas, if you play lethally in the Phantom Pain, you shoot a guy, and then he's just dead, and you can just not think about him again. Kind of like it was in Metal Gear Solid 1. If another guy notices the body and comes over, well, you just shoot him too. And then his body's gone, and the problem solves itself. It's a lot more of an expedient way to play, because when you play lethally, it's a lot less necessary to deal with all of the post-shooting drama of taking the bodies and doing all this other stuff. You kind of just leave the bodies there. In Death Stranding, it's exactly the opposite of this. When you shoot enemies non-lethally, they drop to the ground, and you don't have to deal with them again. They are done. They are over with. Buddy, you've completed dealing with that guy. You're great. But in Death Stranding, if you accidentally kill somebody and you shoot them lethally and they're dead, well, now you've got to do all of the stuff I was just talking about with the non-lethal dudes and hiding the bodies and so on and so forth. That's what you're doing in Death Stranding with using lethal weapons. Is you've got to take these bodies over to the incinerator and kind of hide them in a sense and get rid of them so that it doesn't affect the gameplay world. It doesn't bring in more guards to the area, more BTs, right? Um, yeah, Death Stranding in many ways is just it's a chiral version of Metal Gear. And it's such a blatantly chiral version of Metal Gear. I have to wonder if like this isn't, entirely the point. You see what I'm saying, with chirality being so embedded in the themes here, and then now he's telling us all of this Metal Gear story through Death Stranding. It seems like that's the point. I don't think it's necessarily going to be useful to avoid Metal Gear in interpreting Death Stranding. You can probably still, come up with a great interpretation of Death Stranding on your own, but I think you're missing out on a lot if you just ignore the Metal Gear DNA that is obviously all over Death Stranding, and it's kind of what I'm really excited about. So, anyways, with all that said, what's coming up in the future of the channel is, I said at the beginning, or really the end of last year, that I was going to try and do a pair of videos or a couple of projects on Alan Wake 2 and wider Remedy-verse project stuff, and then also a video on Twin Peaks. And I started watching Twin Peaks early, rewatching it, really. I had rewatched it previously at the end of last year, and everything kind of clicked for me. It was my first time rewatching it after I'd done all my Phantom Pain stuff, and lo and behold, figuring out how the Phantom Pain works helped me figure out how Twin Peaks works. Well, maybe not how it works on the same level of elegance, but I know a lot of this. I've got a lot of tools that are useful, let's say, for interpreting Twin Peaks now. And so I'm going to go over there and do all that. But as I started doing this earlier this year and kind of going through, I got a notebook explicitly for it. I got a whole thing figured out. I'm gonna do this, but as I started, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it was the right time. I was having to force myself to watch it. Having to force yourself to watch Twin Peaks is like absurd, because like, why are you not approaching this show with like the absolute joy and whimsy in your heart that it demands? It's sacrosanct to do it that way, or whatever, sacrilegious to do it that way. So, I took my foot off the gas there for a second, and then David Lynch died. So the universe I think, clearly told me it's not time to do this yet. You need to wait a minute. I think next time I turn on Twin Peaks, I'm probably going to bawl my eyes out. So I'm going to put that off for a little bit. David Lynch was an artist I kind of come to pretty recently, but he was very quickly got near and dear to my heart. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I'm going to be getting back to Twin Peaks soon. I think after I'm done with the Death Stranding stuff, after Death Stranding 2's whole, let's say the post-mortem maybe is going to happen, maybe I'll get into Twin Peaks stuff in the fall and winter of later this year. And I want to do the Twin Peaks stuff first. I think it's going to be more useful to do all of the Twin Peaks interpretation because Twin Peaks came first. And then follow that up with Alan Wake stuff. Because, Lord have mercy, if any video game doesn't draw as much from Twin Peaks as Alan Wake does, I mean, I don't know it. Or should I say that right? If there's any game that does draw from Twin Peaks as much as Alan Wake does, I don't know it. Because, I've talked about, a lot of Kojima's method in making Metal Gear overlaps with a lot of what I've seen going on with Lynch. And so obviously he took inspiration there. But, and clearly those guys knew that stuff. And I say those guys as in Hideo Kojima and Sam Lake. They knew this stuff going back probably. But Twin Peaks came first. And Metal Gear kind of came second. But Metal Gear doesn't have like a recreation of the Double R Diner in it. Not really. Not in the way that Alan Wake 2 does, So I feel like doing the Twin Peaks stuff is going to be more useful for the audience first, and you guys can go through that and have fun and hopefully learn some stuff about Twin Peaks for your next watch through it and have more fun, see new things. And mostly that Twin Peaks, the idea for that one's going to be an investigator's guide, essentially. I'm not going to give you answers. I'm just going to make observations, drawing connections between things in seemingly disparate scenes that actually I think have a lot to do with one another. And these scenes are scattered throughout mostly season 1 to 2, but there's a lot of stuff in season 3 that calls back to stuff in season 2 that really clears up a lot of the more, let's say, labyrinthine parts of the plot of season 2 that people, the parts of season 2 that people seem to skip over. I'm going to tell you guys, the last time I watched Twin Peaks season 2, I laughed harder at season 2 than I did at anything else on the entire show. Like I was gut laughing. I almost, like, I had to pause the show at several times and like stand up and walk around and laugh. It was like, because like I didn't expect these story things to come this way. It was surprising, and he did some very clever storytelling. I say he, the show did some very clever storytelling things, because I think this was more than just David Lynch, y'all. I think this plan required a few people in on it. I'll just say, but I'm gonna go over the Twin Peaks stuff later this year. Then I'm gonna get to the Alan Wake. And, well, that video is not going to be just about Alan Wake 2, but to say what it's fully going to be about will be to spoil it. So let's just call it the Alan Wake 2 video for now. And that one will probably come maybe by the end of this year, but probably you might want to start looking to 2026 for that. Again, y'all, I do this for fun. I don't ask for money from anybody. My YouTube channel is not monetized in any way. Any ads you're seeing on these videos are put there by YouTube and not by me. I don't really want any money for this. I do this for the enjoyment of enriching other people's lives and getting other people to think about this stuff in ways that they haven't. And I know that's not going to be a big mainstream popular thing ever. That's always going to be a thing that only the ones who want to be initiated will come and seek out, and that's fine. That's how I was. That's probably how it should be. Yeah, I think that's about all I've got to talk about. Last thing I do want to mention, just a little note in my private life. I've started doing tarot readings for myself. I got a tarot deck. I'm doing tarot now. Thanks, CD Projekt Red, for putting tarot in your Cyberpunk 2077 game, because that's basically why I have a tarot deck now. And it's a lot of fun. I'm also playing another game I want to mention, Nikke, Goddess of Victory. It's a gacha game. It's kind of a mobile and PC only game. It's some people call it a Gooner game, because it's sort of a pseudo harem fantasy. It's kind of set up. It's a wild game, but there's a lot of interesting things in the story going on that are kind of familiar to me. So I've been enjoying playing that for the past several months, and I don't know if I'm going to do any videos about it, but I just wanted to mention it, just for posterity's sake. I haven't mentioned Nikke in any of these videos, but, y'all, we talk about the ruse right here and there, but I don't really talk about the ruse on here in these videos and on this channel, because it's kind of a thing that you can't really put into static existence in a video and leave it there and have it remain relevant. The ruse is a living thing. It changes with the times, and it's always going to be adapting itself to whatever tomorrow brings. And if you try to identify a version of it, well, it's just gonna shift, and it's gonna change, and it's gonna move past that, and you're gonna be left holding the bag, talking about some crazy stuff that doesn't really exist anymore because the scam's already changed, so to speak. It's a thing that you can't really, like I said, you can't really enumerate it or delineate it easily. But I've got a Discord server where I chat with a few people, and I keep track of a lot of stuff. And I hear a lot. I keep my ear to the rails. There's still stuff going on. Like I said, Nikke, Goddess of Victory has just too many parallels with Metal Gear. That seems like somehow they acquired a document with all the secrets of Metal Gear lore and used it to make their game, and somehow aren't getting sued by Konami, but they're making tens of millions of dollars a month. Kind of stuff, okay? I talk about this a lot in my Discord servers to people every day, but I only make these videos every so often because, like I said, it's such a living thing that once I finished the video and published it, it would become irrelevant, So if you want to chat about that stuff, maybe ask in the comments, and I might give you an invite. It's invite only. It's not a public server, because again, this is not for just anybody. The stuff I do is, it's kind of crazy. I know, but that's symbolism. That's the aesthetics path, you would say, I guess, a little bit. It's pretty neat to me. If I've gotten all this stuff right, maybe there's something to it. Um, I'm having a blast. I'm having fun. Ultimately, that's all it's really about for me. So, hope you've had fun too. If you've watched this far, thank you, and I'll see you next time. Peace.